Hi everybody, this is your Professor Ian. Welcome to week 10 of English 1B. So this is my usual Monday video where I talk about what we did last week, talk about what we're doing this week, try to tie it all together a little bit. So last week we looked at a couple really interesting kind of general overviews of conspiracy theories in America, why people believe in them, what leads people to that way of thinking, and a kind of historical overview that we got in the Hofstetter Essay. We read an essay about reading scholarly articles, and we also looked at rhetorical devices. So let's get into it. I'll start with the Hofstetter. So this is a classic essay about conspiracy theories, the paranoid style. Probably everybody who studies conspiracy theories references this at some point or another. It's this great historical overview where he talks about these conspiracies that go back hundreds of years: the Illuminati, the Masons, the Catholic stuff with the Jesuits, and just Catholicism in general. Catholics have long been the fuel for conspiracy theories for Protestants, so that goes back to the split in the church in the 16th century. But anyway, so a lot of people commented that, hey, this feels like he's talking about today, right? And that's what I really find interesting when I read that essay, aside from some of the conspiracy theories which aren't as popular now, like Masonry and Illuminati. This could be today, right? And things like QAnon are just taking the place of Illuminati in a lot of popular imagination, right? And I think people even make this connection on the internet, calling QAnon part of Illuminati or whatever, making those connections, or like the satanic pedophile rings are part of the Illuminati thing or something. Remember all these Masonry, the Masons are real. Let me just make a side note. There is actually a group called the Masons that are a kind of fraternal organization, get together and do charitable things and have dinners and that kind of stuff, like the Shriners or the Elks Club or something like that. They're not a global group that controls the world and all that kind of stuff. It's an unsupported conspiracy theory like the Illuminati and like the Jesuits and QAnon and such, right? There's theories, but there's absolutely no evidence. Anyways, it's a really interesting overview, and there's reasons he's going through that historical thing too, right? He's not just talking about 1950s and 60s America, which he definitely could with the whole McCarthy Red Scare thing, right? He starts with that and ties it in, but he wants to give us this historical overview because he wants to prove to us that, hey, there's a mindset going on here. There's a mentality that goes beyond just being afraid of communists during the Cold War, because that's not an illegitimate fear at that time, right? When America and Russia were on the brink of nuclear war, it's not unreasonable to be afraid of communists, but it's unreasonable to take it too far, like the John Birch Society did and McCarthy did, and so on. And it ties in, he claims, with this historical perspective, or this historical look at conspiracy theories. Right. So some of the things he points out that he calls it the paranoid style, because he's trying to point out that conspiracy theories, is not a mental illness. It's not that people who struggle with mental health issues are the ones who are believing conspiracy theories. No, these are people who are of sound mind, but they have these proclivities, these beliefs that take on almost the form of paranoia, where everything fits into this system of belief, even though there's no logical evidence for it. Your own pre-existing belief and desire to believe in this makes everything fit in, like a kind of paranoid view of the world, right, caused by mental illness. So anyways, again, he uses this broad time scale because he wants to point out that there's a certain mentality, and he doesn't get into the specifics because it's kind of his conclusion. He's thinking about where to take this in the future. And he's thinking about, that there are certain maybe religious traditions, social structures, what does he say, national inheritances, catastrophes and frustrations, certain factors in society that lead to this mentality that believes in conspiracy theories, right? One of the things he points out that I really find interesting in the essay is that those who feel shut out of decision making, right, only see the effects of power without seeing any of the actual machinery. And I think we can see that happening with conspiracy theories today. There's a lot of people who are not part of the power system and don't really have access to that are spreading these ideas and really believe in them as a way to explain how power works, right? Instead of seeing how power actually operates, how governments make decisions, the kind of like compromise and dance that is politics. Instead, people, go for conspiracy theories to explain things. And this leads to that awesome conclusion where he talks about the whole double sufferer idea. A person who believes in conspiracy theory suffers from the real world, plus their own fantasies about the world, right? So they're shut out of power, they don't have any access and don't see how it works, and so they have these fantasies about how it works that only makes it harder for them in the world. So anyways, good historical overview. Tie in and think about that idea of the conspiratorial mindset mentality. And then in the Oliver and Wood essay, we get a much more kind of data-driven look at why people believe in conspiracy theories. And they're exploring, Hofstetter set up those, he talks about maybe certain religious traditions, certain social structures lead people to believe in conspiracy theories. And that's exactly what Oliver and Wood are exploring, right? And they come up with some interesting conclusions. And this essay is very much a typical academic essay you would find in a research journal. It was published in a research journal. So, it's got an abstract, it's got a method section, it's got a conclusion, all that kind of stuff. And, a lot of people in the discussion on Perusal were shocked by the number of people who believe in conspiracy theories, over half of Americans. And this is a few years ago, too. This is like, I think this article is about a decade old, so it might even be up from here. And there are other studies that show the decline in faith in the U.S. government is, correlates with this, right? More people believe in conspiracy theories, less people trust the government. Makes sense. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in this article, the Oliver and Wood one, about the role of emotion and identity in decision making, which is something we've talked about a bit when we talk about like discourse community and such. We like to think about, logos being the ultimate and everybody believes logic and so on and so forth, but it's just not true. Everybody has their emotion and their identity tied up with what they want to believe, right? So let's see, a couple things that came out. Jason pointed out that what they're stating in this article is that conspiracism has less to do with misinformation, paranoia, and political mistrust, and more to do with how people regularly tend to assume or evaluate something that they may not understand with their own limited knowledge and accept any explanation as long as it makes sense to them, right? And that was a good point. I guess kind of one of the hearts of what's going on in this article is that conspiracism isn't about just fake news and some of the things we're going to look at this week, and like political mistrust, which I was just talking about. Conspiracism is a way that people use to explain very complicated things in the world, right? It's part of people's political discourse because it helps them explain things in a certain way. It's wrong a lot of the time. It's not supported by facts, but it provides explanations for people. Gregory also talked about how, when people attribute things to these unseen forces, these malevolent forces, this is like finding a scapegoat. Right? When people don't know the reason for something, this is Gregory talking. When people don't know the reason for something happening, they often do their best to find one, even it leads to false accusation. And this is a good point to make as well. Our mind is geared to find causes for things and find reasons for things that are happening. So if we see what we think of as a pattern of bad things happening, right, we want to find a cause. Our mind thinks that way, so we do tend to find scapegoats, and it's happened a lot. So anyways, Oliver and Wood reach a couple of really interesting conclusions in their paper. They talk about how the proclivity to make causal attributions of salient phenomena to unseen forces and an attraction to Manichean political narratives leads to conspiratorial thinking, right? It's a fun sentence, right? It's got a lot of really, big $10 words. But what they're saying is that there are two big factors that lead people to conspiratorial thinking. And one of them is, making conclusions about, this happened, it must be caused by this thing happening, right? Making those causal attributions without sufficient evidence, right? Again, our mind is searching for causal relations between things. So the more we're prone to do that, the less we are trained to kind of stop and say, okay, well, how do I know that A caused B, right? Things we've been talking about with the fallacies, the Proctor-Hawk fallacy, right? False or correlation and causation being confused. And their second thing about an attraction to Manichean political narratives. And Manichean political narratives Manichean means good versus evil, right? So if we're prone to thinking that political struggle is all good versus evil, then we're more prone to believe in conspiracy theories. And they make the connection between, some religious backgrounds with Manichean political narratives, because, there are some political traditions that are very much about, good versus evil. Everything in the world is good versus evil. You see that a lot. And that's just not how politics works 99.99% of the time, right? Politics is all about that compromise, that dance, and what can be accomplished between two or more groups that have very different interests, right? And it's not good versus evil, right? Think about it, for example, there are companies that want to develop some of the national forests to extract resources, and there are other people that want to preserve those natural forests because they like to go hiking there. One group is not evil and one group is not good. They just have different interests. We might think that this one is more harmful to everybody and this one is less harmful, so we should go with this one. But that's not good versus evil, right? That's just conflicting interests in a debate, right? Trying to figure out what to do, trying to find a compromise. Anyways, so if you're attracted to those Manichean political narratives, you're more prone to believe in conspiracy theories. This is what their numbers suggest. And think about the link to confirmation bias, right? That's something they point out as well. If we already kind of believe something, we're more prone to believe that conspiracy theory, right? They point this out with the birthers thing, right? So if you are maybe a racist and you don't like the idea that Barack Obama was the president, you're more likely to believe that he was not born in America, right? Because you have that bias already. So that's what they're kind of pointing out there, and I think that's an interesting connection to what we were talking about a few weeks ago. And I think my favorite line in the whole paper is, this is from the Oliver Wood paper, they write, "For many Americans, complicated or nuanced explanations of political events are both taxing and have limited appeal." And I thought that was a good, a funny kind of catty line about maybe Americans' unwillingness to engage in complicated political conversations. And this is something we as students of critical thinking and advanced thinking should keep in mind when we're engaged in political discussions about political events. It's never going to be the easy answer, right? Political events are complicated, nuanced things that are going on, again, between people with different interests trying to find a way to find compromise. It's never this good-evil battle. It's just not how it works. Anyway, so there's lots of really interesting stuff in that paper. We also read an article on reading scholarly articles. It has a really fun style. She uses a lot of metaphors and fun imagery. A lot of people were pointing that out. There's tons of good specific tips, so please do try using some of those. You could use some of them for the Oliver Wood essay especially, because that's a very academic essay. One of the things I really like about it is that idea about having a conversation with the text. That would be my number one tip. Think about if you were in a room with the author and you were discussing this, how would you counter? What would you ask them to clarify? Right? Imagine you're in a conversation. That's a really good way to think about it. Okay, I'm going very long today, so I'll move on quickly. The Flipgrid, I was hoping you would share a written form of your rhetorical device last week so that people could take a look and see what you're doing. So there was a bit of misunderstanding or misreading of the instructions, but whatever, people were sharing rhetorical devices, so that was good. I think the most popular were simile and metaphor. We use these all the time, right? I just used one right now. When I say we use them all the time, that's a metaphor. We don't literally use them all the time, but metaphors and similes are so embedded in our language that they come very naturally to most of us. So just being conscious of that, how you're using simile metaphors, what you should think about. A lot of people like the rhetorical questions. They're a fantastic tool, so try those out. Okay, I'm still marking essay number 2. I've got, I think, about half done, so I'll try to finish those all up this week. I'm going to go finish some of them the week after, but I'm working on those. I've posted everything for essay number 3, including a video where I go through the instructions, so please look that over. This week we're looking at grammar, rhetoric, and style, so a different way to look at grammar. I'm hoping this is useful. Hopefully you covered more hardcore grammar in 1A. This will be kind of overview from a rhetorical point of view. We're also looking at contemporary conspiracy theories in America, so we looked at the kind of historical stuff last week and why people believe in it. And this week we're doing some very current stuff, right? There's a video to watch, really good video. an article on Russian interference, and then a really deep dive into the Pizzagate scandal. And of course, a Flipgrid to complete as usual. So that's about it for now. Please do email me if you have any questions or concerns, or come by my office hours. Thank you very much.